All right, so I am going to show you guys how to clean brass that's been oxidized and how to oxidize brass and tombac and copper and silver and stuff that is raw and super shiny and you want to give it a more antique look. So basically what I've got over here is I've got 5 pieces that are naturally oxidized. They're old, so they picked up a patina. And the first thing I want to show you is you don't necessarily have to clean them to bright, shiny all the way through. If you want to kind of keep a little bit of an antique look, you can just take some 4/0 steel wool, and that's 4 zeros, and you can get it at the hardware store. And you can just kind of buff it up. I don't know if you can see that. You can just kind of buff up the highlights to give it kind of a more dramatic look, but keep it kind of antique looking. And you can buff it up even more. We could make that bright and shiny on the flat bits if we wanted. Like so. But what I'm really going to show you is how to use solutions to do this. So hold on. So what I've got here is two, well basically they're 2 pickle pots, but they're 2 tiny little crock pots. If you look, this one actually came from Goodwill, and it's a little dipper crock pot, and it's for fondue and warm dips. And because apparently nobody actually makes fondue or warm dips, there's always like 30 at Goodwill, at least the Goodwill in Seattle by my house. So you can feel free to get one there. Otherwise, if you buy an actual pickle pot, it's the exact same thing, but it's like 20 bucks. So save yourself some money. In this one here on the left, I have a solution of vinegar and salt that smells like fried fish. And on the right, I have liver of sulphur in water that just smells like eggs. So what I'm going to do is this vinegar and salt solution, it's an acidic solution, and what it's going to do is it's going to pickle or clean these dirty brass pieces. So we're just going to dump them in there, and we're going to kind of spread them around so they're not touching as much as possible, and leave them in there for a little while. The heat from the crock pot is what makes the acid strong enough to actually clean the metal. So in this crock pot with liver of sulphur, I'm going to put in my raw brass pieces, and this is tombac. In case you're unfamiliar with what that is, it's actually a brass that has a really high copper content. It's not really common in stampings from the US, but the stampings that come out of Europe, it's super common. It has kind of a pinkish color. It's not quite a copper color like this is copper. I don't know if you can actually see the difference in this video, but it has a coppery color. A note, if you are cleaning tombac that's been super oxidized and you don't want that copper color, I kind of recommend, if you don't know where the stamping's from, to maybe do a test spot on the back in an unnoticeable spot to see if it's going to be pink when it's clean or like the goldy brassy color. So I'm going to throw those in there, and a copper piece in there, and a sterling piece in there, because they all get the same treatment. So while we wait for the liver of sulphur to do its business, the ones that are being cleaned are done. So I'm going to pop those out of here. And this was the vinegar and salt solution. The recipe for that is about a cup of vinegar to about a tablespoon of salt. And I'm going to go ahead and take them over to the sink and clean them off with some Dawn dish detergent and water, and I'll be right back. So these are those 5 super heavily oxidized pieces that I put in the cleaning solution of vinegar and salt, and as you can see, they are super shiny brass now. So it's a really easy way. It took about 5 to 10 minutes to clean a piece so that it's that bright shiny color again, if that's what you want. I don't like to clean the pieces I sell at all because some people really like that natural oxidization. So yeah, that is the cleaning process. I should note that I'm using, you can't even see them because they're giant. I'm using copper tweezers in the pickle pot with the vinegar and salt. That is because I don't want to cause flashing on the pieces, which is like a copper coating that goes on them. It's not stable. It's not like a plating. It's just kind of annoying. The copper kind of comes out of the brass and turns them reddish. So if you notice that happening, you can go ahead and buff them with a little bit of 4/0 steel wool to clean them up. So this is what I pulled out of the liver sulfur pot, and I should mention this is the liver sulfur I was using. It comes in a gel now. I recommend the gel. It used to only come in lumps and powder, and don't buy the lumps and powder. It's a headache and it expires pretty quickly. So basically, we have silver, and you can buff up the highlights if you want on the silver. This one I found out about midway through was actually lacquer coated to keep it shiny, which is a real thing you have to watch out for. So I took the lacquer coating off with the steel wool about halfway through. So it didn't get as dark as maybe it could have. So I throw in this random scrap of silver, and you can see it's got a little hammer texture on the end there. You can see if you buff it up, you can kind of buff up the highlights and leave the recessed pieces dark, and that gives it a nice, where's my light, a nice antique look on this terrible, nasty scrap of sterling. So there's silver, and then we have copper here. This is a piece of copper. Again, you'll want to kind of buff it up. I usually leave copper in a little longer. So this is what that copper piece looks like buffed up a little. It's still a darker copper than it started, and it's got some dark recesses. The brass I usually leave in for 3 hours, but I don't have all night. I love you guys, but not that much. So it just got a little oxidized, but you can see buffing up the highlights. It already looks a lot more antiqued. It's got some darkness in the recesses. So that is on brass. Again, I'd say like 3 hours in the crock pot for brass is pretty standard for me, but I like that dark kind of chocolatey color. If you just want like dark recesses, like brown recessed bits, and then a golder color, don't leave it in that long. Maybe leave it in for half an hour to an hour. And then this is the tombac. It's completely black, and if we just buff up those highlights, you can see it turns into really beautiful little antique looking pieces there, and it takes almost no effort, which is my favorite part of liver of sulfur for antiquing things. If you want to preserve these patinas, so if you want to preserve this look and this darkness on these pieces, what you need to do is kind of coat them in something. A really standard thing for the jewelry industry is Renaissance wax, and it's just kind of a really fine wax that you can coat something in. It doesn't last forever, but it does last a while, so you can recoat as necessary if it starts to oxidize. You can have things professionally lacquer coated, but I don't do it. I don't know anyone that actually does it unless they're getting something plated. So these are the pieces we came up with that now look much more antiqued and oxidized, and it was super easy.